Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today on the Not a Nail Tech series, you need to buckle up, get yourself a cup of tea, get comfortable, whatever you need for the long haul, because this is a bit of a longer video because we're doing a very detailed set based on My Neighbor Totoro, which is a Studio Ghibli film, and if you haven't watched it, 10 out of 10 would recommend. So we've started with Wolfsbane and we've actually done 2 coats of that curing in between, and before we cure that second layer, we're just going in with some crystal clear and putting that all over the top of the nail because we just want to create some texture so we can stipple on some other colours and it'll stick really well. You just want to make sure this is really well covered because it will start to absorb the acrylic powder. You just want it to be nice and matte before it goes in the lamp. Once that's cured, dust it off and we're going to use Storm Watch. We're just popping this on a sponge and we're going to be sponging this on different areas of the nail. So the aim for this is I wanted it to be grey and moody and rainy like on the promotional posters for this film. So I'm just stippling on that lighter grey all over the outside of the nail, leaving the middle bit a little bit clearer with the darker colour coming through, just because I want it to look like rain clouds and a little bit like concrete-y, that kind of effect. So before that's cured, I'm just going back in with that acrylic powder and popping that all over again. Once that's cured and dusted off, we're going back in with the same colour just on those corner bits there, just to add some dimension. And again, we'll just be covering that in acrylic powder again. I'm going to cure that for 60 seconds before going in with Lily of the Nile, and this is just going on a sponge again, on a fresh bit of sponge and just onto those corners but not quite as far in as the other colours. And as you can see, this makes a really moody, cloudy kind of texture, and because this is the last colour we're adding for this background, we don't need to put any acrylic powder on. Just cure that, then we're using our gel top coat nail sealer, and this is just to even out all of that texture that we've created. Pop that into cure and then we're going in with matte coat, and this is just to mattify the whole nail before we go on to the next design. I do want these nails to be quite matte anyway, but doing detail work is much easier when you've got a matte background so nothing slips and slides. Cure that, and then this is the set that we're working on, and these are the backgrounds, and I love them as they are. They really do look like concrete. So I'm going to be using Snow White first of all, and on 2 of the nails I'm going to be creating some clouds. So I'm just using a dotting tool, and you just want to put bigger dots in the middle and taper them out to the sides, and it's so easy to create a cloud with this kind of technique. Once you've got those clouds in place, you're going to take some acetone, and you haven't cured these clouds, they need to be uncured. Use that acetone and you're just going to kind of smush it around on the cloud, and it'll remove some of that gel polish, make some of it see-through, make some of it look fluffier, and just make the shape look a little bit more natural as well. And once you're happy with that, cure it, and we're going back in with matte coat. And you will see throughout this set that I do things a little bit backwards, and it's because I was actually deciding how I was going to do the nail as I was doing it. So once that's cured, I'm going in with Serious Black on the other nails, and these are actually going to be Soot sprites. If you've seen My Neighbor Totoro, they're the little fuzzy cute little guys that carry stars around. Oh, they're so cute. Anyway, we're going to dab that with a sponge, and it's just going to blend it out just a little bit because we want a bit of an ombre effect around the outside of these circles. And once you've sponged that, we're going to stick that in the lamp to cure. Next, we're going back in with another dot in the middle of those circles just because I want them to be a bit darker. And again, we're going to go in with a sponge and just sponge them down, and they'll just be like the same layer as before, just a little bit darker. And then we're going to cure that. Next, we're just going in with a fine detail brush and some Serious Black and just adding in some fuzzy lines around the outside. So you're going to do this on all of the circles. I wanted to make a lot of the elements on this nail set 3D, so I'm just using our nail tip gel adhesive, which is also a sculpting gel, and rubbing that into a circle. If it gets a bit sticky, just use some gel res. As you can see, those gloves are a bit wet, that's what I've been using. Pop it on the nail and we're just going to tap it into place until we're happy with the shape, size and position. Now that's cured, we're going back in with matte coat and just going back over everything. Just seal it all in and make it easy for the next steps. Once that's cured, I'm going back in with our gel top coat nail sealer and just going over those 3D sections because I'm going to be going and pouring some black acrylic powder over the top of these to make them look matte and fuzzy and dusty. Now that's covered, I'm leaving it uncured and just going in with that acrylic powder. Same as before, you just want to make sure it's well covered and completely matte before it goes in the lamp because it does start to get absorbed by the gel polish. Once that's cured, we're using Snow White and we're just making some eyes, so I'm using a dotting tool and making them more into ovals rather than circles, just because they are a little bit longer, and just doing that on all of the little dots. So I have actually done this on 2 different nails, but I'm just showing you it on one. Next I'm just going in with Serious Black, now that's cured, and using the smaller dotting tool and just adding in the middle of the eyes. And already these are looking so heckin' cute. Next I'm just going in with a really long fine detail brush and adding in some arms and legs, and they have really funny little wibbly wobbly legs, so I'm trying to get a little bit of motion in them as well. This one's not got quite as much motion, but some of the others do. They all look like they're having a little party. Once I've done that on all of my little Soot sprites, I'm going in with these 3 colours. We've got Guac, we've got Tangerine Twist, and we've got Lily of the Nile, and I'm going to be adding in some stars. So I found the easiest way of doing this was adding in a dot, taking a really small detail brush and just pulling out those points. And then just neaten it up at the end to make sure the proportions look right. And I'm just doing that with every single colour, add in that dot and then pull out those points on the stars. So I'll let you just watch this next bit because it's just the same process over and over again. Once I'm happy with that, I'm popping it in the lamp to cure and then just going in with matte coat around all of the Soot sprites. I don't want to go over any of that acrylic powder because I want it to keep its texture. So I'm just going to go over all of the background and over the eyes as well. And now that's cured, we have our really cute Soot sprite nail. Next, I'm using one of those cloudy nails as the background and going in with our nail tip gel adhesive, and we're going to be making Totoro. So I've just added a big blob in like a ovally kind of shape. It gets bigger at the bottom, and I'm just patting that all down into place, and I'm going to go in and just mark out where his head is, because there is a little bit of a delve where his head starts, and he's very funny proportions, not what you'd expect, so it took me a little while to get him right. I definitely felt at one point like I'd got it completely wrong, but in the end I think he looked cute. So again, while using this product, if it gets a little bit sticky, I usually dip my silicone tool in some gel residue remover, and that just helps it from sticking. I'm just going to add in some delves at the side to mark out where his arms are, and then I'm adding on some ears, and these are quite angular towards the head, so I'm just adding in some little bits where I cut in towards the head and make them a bit more triangular as well. I do apologise, it's quite hard to see because I've used a clear product here, but it'll all come together in the end, I promise. I'm going to cure that and then go in with Atlantic Storm, and we're going to pop this all over his body just to give him a base coat. As I was putting this on, I did realise it was a little bit more blue than I was after. I hadn't really put the colours together for the background and for Totoro, so I hadn't realised how blue it would look against the background. So I put this down as a base coat, but I am going to mix a couple of colours together just to make the final colour for Totoro. I'm just going to make sure I get down all of the sides of that 3D product just to make sure there's no clear bits, make sure he's well covered. Once he's covered, I'm going to pop him in the lamp to cure, and then I'm going to mix Stormwatch in with Atlantic Storm just to make a slightly more grey toned base for him, because I wanted a little bit of blue but not too much, and I'm just going to pop that all over again where I've just painted. I'm going to pop him back in the lamp, and then I'm using Barley Fields, and this is going to be the colour for his tummy. So he's got quite a large oval shape on his tummy, so I'm just going to mark that all out and fill it all in. So I have to say, I don't normally do a lot of character stuff when it comes to nail art, because it's a bit scary, isn't it? Like, if you get it wrong, it's dead obvious you've got it wrong because you're copying off something that already exists, something that people recognise. So I was a little bit nervous doing this nail specifically because he's such an iconic character from the Studio Ghibli universe. But I hope he turns out alright and you guys like him. So I'm just going to cure that, go in with the second coat, but you don't need to see that because it's exactly the same. And I'm mixing together Atlantic Storm and Stormwatch again, and we're going to add in some little chevrons, some little arrow point things on his tummy. So I've just got in with a dotting tool to add on the product, and then I'm just going to go along and drag that out to make the chevrons. So he does have like 2 rows of chevrons, but I've just shown you the top row there because we're going to go in with some serious black and just outline around his tummy. So this line is meant to be wibbly wobbly, it's meant to look furry, fuzzy, so I didn't want to do it perfectly straight. I wanted to add in some texture just to help to make him look like a furry guy. I'm just going in and adding some shadows in the arms as well to make them stand out a bit more. Once that's cured, I'm going back in with our gel top coat nail sealer and I'm going over the full top of Totoro but not the background. Because like we've done earlier in this video, we're going to be adding some acrylic powder to make him look a bit fuzzy. So I'm just using crystal clear because I don't want to cover up any of the details and just go over that guy, make sure he's well covered and is matte before he goes in the lamp. Once that's cured, you just want to dust off all of that excess and then we're going to go back in with Snow White and we're going to give him some eyes. So I actually redid this multiple times, which I haven't shown you because we would be here for absolutely forever. But I have altered his eyes slightly than what they were originally because they just didn't look quite right. So I'm just going back in with Barley Fields and making a little nose shape, so a little dot dragging out to the sides. Make sure that's all cured and then I'm going in with Serious Black and a teeny tiny dotting tool and we're going to add in his pupils and just some little nostrils as well. Once that's done, I'm just going back in with Serious Black and we're going around all of the outside of Totoro and giving him a little bit of an outline. We're not making this too perfect, we're working on different line qualities to give him some character. And I don't know if you know this, but my background is in art and fashion and textiles, so I've done a lot of illustration work and that kind of thing. And a lot of the time you're working with getting your line quality right because that makes such a difference. And I find with stuff like this, it definitely looks a lot better if it's textural and it's got to look intentional. You can't just make it look messy, but intentional, different line qualities really give it a little bit of movement and character. Once you're happy with the outline, we're going to go in and just add some details to those chevrons. So on Totoro, they do actually have a full black outline, but because they're so teeny tiny on this nail, I'm just going to add in some details to the top edges just to give it a bit of dimension. And you're going to do the same on that bottom row of chevrons too. Next, I'm just going in adding some whiskers, so I'm just trying to line them up right. Again, this was another thing where I managed to get the placement so wrong multiple times, so I've wiped it off and come back in again. But yeah, we're just putting 3 little whiskers on each side. We're going to stick that in the lamp for 60 seconds and then we're going back in with our nail tip gel adhesive and we're going to be making a little leaf. So if you have seen the promotional poster for this film, he has a little leaf hanging on his head and I think it's to stop the rain from getting him because they're stood in the rain and the little girl that's with him has an umbrella. So I thought I would add in this little leaf as a 3D element on top of his head, and we're just going to make sure we've got the shape right on that and that I'm happy with how it looks before I cure it. I'm just going to colour that in with guac. And I'm just going to cover the whole thing and I'm just adding in a little stem for the leaf as well. Once that's cured, I'm using Serious Black and just adding some more of those textural lines around the outside, and I'm also going to add in some kind of fold lines, some shadow lines on the leaf as well, so it doesn't look too flat. I'm also going to go down the side of that stem and just give that a bit of depth too. Once that's cured, I'm going back in with Snow White and a dotting tool because I was silly enough to put clouds on before I put the characters on, and they're all in the wrong place now. So I'm just going to add in some more clouds where they're a little bit more visible. And I do quite like the fact that some of them are laid behind Totoro's head, but I did want them to be a little bit more obvious. So I'm just going back in and doing that same technique, dotting on the white and then going in with acetone and just smushing them out a little bit. Once that's cured, I'm going in with matte coat and just going over all of the bits that aren't covered in acrylic and need finishing off. So I'm going over the whole background, and then I'm going to go over the little leaf and the eyes and stuff like that, just anywhere it would be tacky. And again, I don't want to go over the whole of Totoro because it'll get rid of his texture. And there he is. I think he's ended up relatively cute. Not totally accurate, but he's definitely almost there. For the next nail, we're going to be doing Mei, the little girl in the film. So we're starting off with Oopsie Daisy and just going in and marking out where the top of her body is going to be. So for this nail, I decided to not do Mei's face because it would be so small on this nail, and even just doing Totoro was quite a struggle with the size of the shape of him and everything. It's hard to get that much detail in, and I thought trying to do a face that small would be even more difficult. So what I've decided to do is put the umbrella over her head, you know, like as if you were holding it over your head and tilting your head down to stop the rain from getting to you. That's the kind of vibe we're going for. So I'm just going in with Tangerine Twist and I'm just marking out where her skirt's going to be, and I'm also going to be adding in her little straps for a dress as well, for a pinafore. Once that's cured, I'm going in with Sugar Cookie, and this is the skin tone we're using for Mei. So I'm just going to mark where her legs are, and I'm just marking the tops of her legs because she's actually wearing quite big welly boots. So I'm just going to mark them on, and then I'm also going to go in with Lily of the Nile once that's cured to add in those boots. So I'm just marking out the shapes at this point because I will be going in and adding the details later in Serious Black. So as long as the shape's right, it should be fine. Like I say, you want to flash cure in between these sections because you don't want anything to get smudged. And again, going in with Sugar Cookie, and I'm just marking where her hand's going to be. So she's holding up an umbrella, so her hand is kind of in a fist in front of her chest. So I've just done 2 little dots and a line down to where her elbow would be. And I'm just going to mark on an arm down the other side as well. Next, I'm just going back in with Oopsie Daisy and just marking on her sleeves, making sure they're over where the arm should be. And I'm just adding in some more of that Sugar Cookie for her arm as well. So like I said, we're going to go in and add those details now that's cured, and I'm taking Serious Black on a very, very small brush and just marking around all of those sections, and it'll just help give it a bit of depth and be easier to see just because it is so small. I'm also going in and just adding in the handle of the umbrella. It's only a little detail, but I think it'll finish it off in the end. And that's just going to go through a hand and just in front of a body. And finally just adding in some teeny tiny dots for buttons. Once that's skewered, I'm using our nail tip gel adhesive and I've just popped on like a mushroomy shape, and this is the umbrella. I thought I'd do this 3D just to tie all of the nails together with 3D elements. So I'm just shaping that until I'm happy. So I'm flattening off the top and curving it around at the bottom. And I'm just going to go in with one of our pointier silicone tools and just add in some curves for where the stems of the umbrella would meet the edges and it would kind of taper in. Cue with that, and then I'm going in with saffron and I'm just painting this over the whole umbrella. And I did do 2 coats of this, but again I didn't show you the second coat because it would take a little bit too long to get through the video. Once that's skewered, I'm going in with Serious Black and we're adding in some details. So we're going to do the lines down the umbrella and a bit of an outline as well. I'm going to pop that into Cure and then mix some Snow White with some saffron to make a highlight colour for the umbrella. And I'm just doing a curved section and filling it in towards the top, and these will just look like the sun is hitting the umbrella. So I'm just going to do this on all of the different panels. Cue with that, then we're using Snow White. And again, I'm just going back in and adding some clouds because the others are a little bit behind her and I felt like I could do with just a couple more. So dot that Snow White on, and then we're going to use acetone on a brush and smush it out. Once that's skewered, I'm going in with matte coat and just going over absolutely everything. And I did think I was going to stop at this point, and then I realised there's actually a lot of blank space at the bottom of the nail, and I definitely have that too much gene where I think I can always improve on something. So I'm just going to take some Wolfsbane and some guac, and we're going to use Wolfsbane for the floor and the guac is going to be for some grass. Once that's done, I'm just using Wolfsbane again, and I'm going in and marking out for a bus stop sign. So I'm just doing the post here, and then I'm going to go in with a different colour for the actual sign. So I'm using Winter Sea, and I'm just dotting that on and moving it around until the circle is the size and shape that I'm after. Now that's skewered, I'm taking Snow White and we're just going to be making a shape on here, just a rectangle, and there's going to be some text to go inside of there. Obviously it's so small that you couldn't do any actual text, so it's just going to be gobbledygook. So I'm just going to use Serious Black and just put some markings on there in the hope that it looks like a sign. And then I'm just going to go back around the outside and just add an outline to the circle. Once that's cured, I'm just going in with some Snow White again and just adding in another little sign on there, and it's just similar to the one that was on the promotional poster. I just felt like it needed it. And just outline that in black again. Once that's all cured, I'm going back in with matte coat and going over absolutely everything all over again. And once that's cured, we have the full set. I'm quite proud that I managed to do these because it was definitely one of the bigger challenges of nails that I've done. Anyway, if you like this video, please do let us know. We want to know what you want to see next, and if you want any of the products, they'll be linked down below and tagged in the video. And we'll see you next time, guys. See you later. Bye.